I'm Adam.
And I'm Duke.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way.
Howdy there, Adam. You seen my hat anywhere?
Howdy, Duke. Your hat? Nope, can't say I have. Maybe it's hanging out on the clothesline.
Clothesline? Ain't that for fancy city folks? I stick to my old ways, you know.
I would definitely not say that clotheslines are for fancy city folks. And you might be missing out. I hung my shirt out to dry yesterday. Fresh air and sunshine beats any tumble dryer.
Fresh air? I get enough of that riding in the range. And sunshine? I prefer the shade of my trusty hat, if I could only find it.
Maybe your hat took a stroll on the clothesline. You never know. They say hats have a life of their own. In today's book, it's a true story of sacrifice and bravery that shows us that when we have courage and compassion for the world around us, even the simplest items can become powerful tools for change. Let's get started. The Clothesline Code, the story of Civil War spies Lucianne and Dabney Walker, written by Janet Halfmann, illustrated by Tricia Mason. Author's note: this story of Lucianne and Dabney Walker is true to the known facts of their lives and the society of their time. I had to imagine some scenes and thoughts, but they are based on documented events and actions. Although many Union scouts wore civilian clothes, we have pictured Dabney in an Army uniform. We did that because Union Captain George F. Noyes wrote in 1863 that Dabney sallied forth with military cap, blue coat, as the usual guide for the cavalry. Dabney Walker stared up the hill, captivated by the Union soldiers waving red and white flags. Two soldiers took turns holding a long flagpole and waving the flag to the right and left, over and over again, with dash and flourish. 52-year-old Dabney had just been assigned to the camp's brand new intelligence unit, and he wanted to know more about these flags. He asked the officer leading the flag drill to explain what the movements meant. The officer told Dabney that the flag waving was a code for communicating across long distances on a battlefield. The code was simple, but it worked extremely well. A flag wave to the left stood for the number 1. A flag wave to the right stood for the number 2. Different combinations of these two numbers stood for each letter of the alphabet. Strung together, the letters spelled out messages. To make things clearer, the officer offered to demonstrate the letter C. He called out 212, and a soldier trained as a flagman whipped the flag to his right, then to his left, then his right again, swiftly and precisely. Excited, Dabney hurried off to locate his wife, Lucianne. He found her, as usual, under the clothesline, hard at work as a camp laundress. The couple and their teenage daughter, Sarah, had fled slavery and escaped to this Union camp in Northeast Virginia about a year earlier. Since then, Dabney had worked as a cook and a valued scout for the camp, a Union stronghold in this otherwise slave state. As a native Virginian, Dabney was so skilled at finding the hiding places of the enemy Confederate Army that they offered $1,500 reward for his head. Now, in early 1863, the Union camp's new leader, Major General Joseph Hooker, wanted to know every detail about the Confederate Army. He was especially interested in General Robert E. Lee's forces directly across the Rappahannock River from the Union camp. Dabney was ready and determined to be the best spy ever. Learning how the flag sent messages gave him a big idea. Dabney grabbed a pillowcase and put it on the end of a stick. He waved it first to his right, then to his left, then to his right again, explaining to Lucianne that the movement stood for the letter C. He told her he wanted to come up with their own signals. Then they could sneak into Confederate headquarters across the river and use the signals to send secrets back to the Union camp. Lucianne was eager to help, but she wondered what they could use instead of letters. When they were enslaved, Dabney and Lucianne hadn't been allowed to learn to read and write, plus they needed something that was easy to see across the river, but wouldn't attract unwanted attention. The couple thought long and hard, all the while watching the laundry on the clothesline whipping in the wind. Then it hit them. They could use laundry on a clothesline to send signals across the river. For Lucy-Ann, who had spent her entire life washing clothes for others, the idea made perfect sense. But Dabney had second thoughts. If they used laundry to signal, Lucy-Ann would have to be the one to go into the entire territory to steal and send Confederate secrets. If the enemy found out she was a spy, she would almost certainly be hanged. But Lucy-Ann had made up her mind, and that was it. The couple had already faced grave dangers by escaping slavery. Both were willing to take more risks to help others gain freedom.
You know, back in my cowboy days, we didn't have all these fancy signals y'all city folks use nowadays.
Well, times have changed, my friend. Signals make life easier. Like traffic signals, they keep chaos at bay.
Traffic signals? I reckon those are the things that light up like a Christmas tree, right?
Yeah, exactly. Red means stop, green means go, and yellow means hurry up before it turns red.
Well, ain't that something? In my day, we had a simpler system. If someone yelled, whoa, and then you just stopped. If they yelled, giddy up, you went.
That's one way to do it. But, Duke, imagine if you had traffic signals for cattle herding. A little red light could mean mosey on over to the left.
Now, that's an idea. But what about teaching? How to use signals in that fancy school of yours?
Well, we have our own set of signals. You know, like raising your hand means you've got something important to say.
Well, shoot. In my classroom, if you had something to say, you just hollered. There was no need to raise your hand.
Creating the Clothesline Code was a huge job. The Confederate Army was spread out in different units. Lucy-Ann and Dabney had to create a unique laundry code to represent each unit. The couple picked different color shirts to stand for the forces of each Confederate leader. Gray for Confederate General James Longstreet, white for General A.P. Hill, and red for General Stonewall Jackson. Lucy-Ann and Dabney plotted how they would move each general's shirt to show a movement of his forces. Removing the gray Longstreet shirt from the line would signal that his troops had moved nearer to Richmond, Virginia. Moving Hill's white shirt up the clothesline would mean his unit had moved upstream, and on and on. A separate clothesline would signal what was happening at General Lee's headquarters across the river. A single item in the line would mean that Lee and his soldiers were on the move. 2 pieces would signal no change. 3 would warn that Lee was adding more troops to his forces. The couple practiced the laundry movements again and again. Soon they both felt ready. Now they just needed a way to sneak Lucy-Ann across the river. In mid-February, an opportunity arose. Camp soldiers were helping a Confederate woman living in the Union-occupied area travel safely to visit friends across the river. Lucy-Ann hid her face with her shawl and pretended to be the woman's servant. Lucy-Ann's heart raced with fear that she would be stopped, but she forced herself to stay calm. The trick worked, and she was allowed on the boat. Once on the opposite shore, Lucy-Ann slipped away unseen toward the Confederate headquarters. As she ran, she constantly looked all around to make sure no one saw her. Lucy-Ann knew she faced harsh punishment or even death if she was caught. At General Lee's camp, she joined a group of enslaved workers doing laundry and acted as though she had been there all along. Soon she was washing clothes and cooking for General Lee and his officers. She and Dabney were ready to spy. Before long, Dabney was providing vital information to Union officers about the enemy's movements, sometimes even before they happened. The officers puzzled over how he was getting such timely and accurate intelligence. For a long time, Dabney kept the Clothesline Code a secret from other soldiers to keep Lucy-Ann safe. Finally, after much pleading from the camp's officers, he took one of them to a high point with a clear view across the river. Dabney pointed and asked the officer if he could see a cabin with a clothesline. The officer looked through his field glasses and nodded. "Well," said Dabney, "that clothesline tells me in half an hour just what goes on at Lee's headquarters." Dabney explained that his wife worked at the Confederate headquarters and secretly listened closely to everything being said there. The body servants of Confederate officers also shared secrets with her. When Lucienne had information, she headed to the clothesline. She was careful not to rush or attract attention that might endanger her or her chance to spy. She kept clothes on the line at all times so as not to arouse suspicion. The Clothesline Code could even handle tricky situations. One morning, Dabney reported lots of movements by the Confederate Army. "But," he said, "they're just making believe." Surprised, an officer asked Dabney how he knew the enemy was playing a trick. Dabney pointed to Lucienne's clothesline at the two blankets pinned together. He explained this was Lucienne's signal for troops being moved just to confuse the Union. "Why, that's her way of making a fish trap. And when she pins the clothes together that way, it means that Lee is only trying to draw us into his fish trap."
Well, partner, I reckon there's more to my life than just rustling tumbleweeds. You ever thought about being a spy?
A spy? Duke, you've been out in the sun too long. What in tarnation are you talking about?
I'm serious, Adam. Imagine us sneaking around in them shadows, wearing them fancy spy gadgets. It'd be like James Bond with a 10-gallon hat.
James Bond with a hat, that's a new one. What would our mission be?
Well, we could start by investigating who'd been stealing all the cookies from Mrs. Jenkins' kitchen. I reckon that's a spy-worthy mission.
Cookies, Duke? Really? I thought you were going to say something about saving the world or stopping a train heist.
Adam, them cookies are a national treasure. Be sure we could work our way up to stopping train heists, but gotta start small.
Then one day the laundry fell silent. Not a single piece moved for days. Had something happened to scare Lucienne? Had she been found out or put in jail? Dabney's heart throbbed with dread that his wife was in danger. He couldn't eat or sleep. He feared she may have been hanged. For several long days he watched and worried, his heart aching and his fears growing, but still no clothes moved. Finally, the laundry signaled again. What a relief! Dabney jumped up and down, punching the air with joy that Lucienne was all right. Day after day, until late April, Lucienne made the laundry whisper its secrets, and Dabney and the Union officers paid close attention. With the onset of spring and good weather, it was time for General Hooker to lead his troops into battle. General Hooker had a bold plan to take the Confederate forces by surprise. Thanks to the Walkers, the Union Army was ready. General Hooker's spy unit had given him a clearer picture of the enemy than at any time since the war began. For that, he owed thanks to many, including the brave and dedicated Walkers. An officer praised the couple as being among the promptest and most reliable of General Hooker's spies. Lucienne and Dabney took tremendous risks to their lives in order to help others on the long journey toward freedom. Afterward. From 1861 to 1865, the northern and southern states of the United States fought a civil war primarily over slavery. Southerners wanted slavery to be legal in the nation's new territories, and Northerners did not. The bitter division caused 11 southern slave states, including Virginia, where the Walkers lived, to leave the United States and form the Confederate States of America. The northern states remained the United States of America, or the Union. In the spring of 1863, despite General Hooker being extremely well informed about the enemy, thanks to the Walkers and other Union spies, the Union lost the battle, now known as the Battle of Chancellorsville. After the defeat, the Union troops again settled for several weeks on the northern bank of the Rappahannock River. Thankfully, Lucienne somehow managed to escape back to the safety of Union lines. No record exists of why her laundry signals had stopped for a time. When the Union Army left Virginia in June 1863 for battle elsewhere, the Walkers headed to Washington, D.C., their part-time home since September of 1862. They lived in Washington when they weren't needed by the Union Army. While in D.C., Dabney helped create military maps in the city with Union Captain William H. Payne during November and December of 1862. In May of 1864, Dabney again returned to Virginia to scout for the Union Army during its drive toward Richmond. It is unknown whether Lucy Ann went with him or stayed in Washington. Following the war, the Walkers continued to live in Washington, D.C. Dabney worked as a carpenter and a laborer, and Lucy Ann as a laundress. Along with 6 other formerly enslaved men, Dabney founded the Fifth Baptist Church, now Vermont Avenue Baptist, in Washington, D.C., on June 5, 1866. The church was the scene of Sarah Walker's marriage in 1871 to Charles Barnes of Maryland. The couple had 2 children. Unfortunately, little is known of the Walkers' family life in Washington. Lucy Ann died at age 66 on June 12, 1880. Dabney remarried Rosie Dean in 1881. He died at age 74 on April 23, 1885. Lucy Ann Dabney and their daughter and grandchildren are buried at Mount Pleasant Plains Cemetery, Walter Pierce Park in Washington, D.C. If we were spies, we'd need code names. I'll be Agent Apple and you can be Agent Biscuit. Agent Biscuit? Well, it ain't as cool as Agent Apple, but I reckon it's got a certain charm to it. Now, Duke, remember, we gotta be stealthy and move quietly. No loud cowboy boots or spurs clinking. Don't you worry, Agent Apple. I'll tiptoe like a prairie breeze, just as silent as a snake in the grass. All right, Agent Biscuit. Let's go solve the case of the mysteriously disappearing cookies. The fate of Mrs. Jenkins' kitchen depends on us. You betcha, Agent Apple. The spy duo of the Wild West rides again. And if you've enjoyed this video, please don't sneak around. Just give it a thumbs up and subscribe to the channel. I'm Adam.
And I'm Duke.
And this is Where There's a Williams, There's a Way. Did you know the word clothesline was first used in 1830? The earliest American model of a clothesline is the Dickey's patent clothes drying machine, which was mentioned in the August 1851 issue of Scientific American.